Welcome to procurement. Like Dana said, what we're going to do is it is broken up into some sections. So maybe when we get to the section points, you'll see a kind of a blue screen. We can stop then and answer any of the questions that you guys have typed in. Dana and I both in the past, we have done the procurement review. So if you guys are not aware, this will be going next year, this upcoming year will be our 5th year to do procurement reviews. Last year we had them, we had a consultant, DWG. They're the ones that conducted them. They will be doing that again this year. So if you are getting a school review, the chances of you getting a procurement review is high. I'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. But now USDA, if you were not aware, there is a separate procurement review in addition to your AR that your consultant won't do. They'll have it, we'll have this consulting firm do it just because it's a lot more work on the consultant. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today what we're going to talk about is procurement. We're going to discuss the methods of procurement. We're going to talk about how to award the bid, managing the contract and agreement, and records. So what is procurement? Procurement is a multi-step process in obtaining equipment, materials, or supplies for the lowest price. And all goods and services that you purchase with child nutrition, they must meet these requirements. It's regulatory. Again, USDA finds it so important that they have created a whole separate review just for procurement. Oh, fancy. I didn't know you had fancy things going on. So the purpose of our procurement is so that you have free and open competition exist and you're getting the maximum degree possible at like the lowest price. So the main thing with procurement is you're just going out to seeing, you're going out and selecting places based on price or services, but we're going to go through each type and the exact way of how you should do it, because we see a lot of this when it comes to doing the reviews. And I'll give you some hints, because some things are getting very confusing when you guys are filling out the tool. So again, what is procured? Any products or services purchased with child nutrition funds, they must be procured using USDA guidelines. There's no exception. Whenever we do reviews, we ask to see your expenditures because we have to know what you spent with child nutrition funds, and everything that you spend with child nutrition funds must be procured properly. The only things that are allowed that don't have to be procured are like commodity processing fee, or like a commodity fee that you pay DHS or the health department, because you can't procure those. For you to have a license with the health department, you have to pay the health department. So those things don't have to be procured, but any other service or any other product that you are paying with child nutrition funds, you must do one of these methods of procurement that we're going to talk about. Okay. Again, all goods and services purchased with child nutrition funds must be used by child nutrition, or the price must be prorated based on child nutrition use. Doing some of these reviews, we would find things on your expenditure that were spent with child nutrition funds, but they were not used for child nutrition purposes. So again, whenever you are purchasing items, not only do you have to procure it for the federal guidelines per USDA, but what you are purchasing, it has to be for child nutrition purposes. Some example is I had one that the whole school's AT&T phone bill was listed that child nutrition paid for. Like, we look at that, we look at your expenditures whenever we're doing our procurement reviews. Again, if you say maybe one person has a phone that does do, say, procurement purposes or for child nutrition, one cell phone, you can use that one person's cell phone, but you can't pay for the entire district. It has to be for child nutrition purposes. Okay, so we're going to talk about the federal guidelines. And so we just want to make you aware of what they are so that way you guys can procure properly. So now we're going to plan. So procurement cannot be effective and fully competitive unless the district first spends adequate time planning the process. Planning has a huge effect on the district's ability to obtain high quality products and serves at the lowest price. It also ensures the procurement is consistent with applicable laws. So the procurement plan establishes the infrastructure for planning and is the same for both informal and formal procurement procedures. Planning the procurement includes determining the goods and services needed, reaching out to potential contractors, vendors, and developing a procurement schedule. Okay, so where do you get started? The best way to do procurement for the next school year is referred to as forecasting. So the time you spend to accurately estimate the quantity and quality of goods, products, and services needed for the school year is important. Use historical information from menus, production records, and the average daily participation to help develop your forecast numbers. Forecasting also includes having knowledge of the USDA Foods reviewing documentation received from the Food Distributing Agency. In Oklahoma, this is DHS. So things that you forecast, again, look at your menus for the upcoming year. You may look to see, look at your numbers as served, see what your enrollment is. Has it changed? Has it fluctuated? Did it go down? Did it go up? Also, I mean, especially with this year being different, you guys are probably using other items that you guys have not really used in the past, for instance, like paper products. I'm sure a lot of you that did not use little containers to put fruits and veggies in as you are doing this year due to COVID. Another tool that can assist forecasting foods is the food production records. Again, your changes in enrollment and your inventory records. Changes in student enrollment might be indicated by recruitment of new industry in an area or industry or business that might close. It's very important also about your inventory records. Basing food needs as an accurate inventory data can result in spending money on items that are not needed. Running short on an item resulting in emergency procurement may lead to higher prices. I had one school years and years and years ago, they did not, well, I think they did keep an accurate inventory. It's just they bought the same things every single month. And when the new person came in behind them, they had like literally a pallet of butter that was never used. She would just order the same thing every single order. So definitely utilize your inventory to see what you have and what you need to be using. Or again, if you're running out of things, how you need to bump that up. So the purpose of procurement. Now that you have forecasted the products and services being purchased and how much is needed, there are four overarching principles and practices that to use. One must be free and open competition. All suppliers have equal opportunity, does not restrict competition, and does not eliminate competition. Responsive and responsible contractors. Responsive products or services meets what the district needs, and responsible that they can meet and will meet the terms of your contract. Fairness and integrity. Suppliers must be given every consideration. Unethical practices, whether real or apparent, must be corrected immediately by the district. Not addressing unethical practices until potential contractors protest is not appropriate and diminishes the integrity of the procurement process and the SFA and compromises the employment of the person involved in the practice. And then transparency. Transparency leads to operation of an accountable and cost-effective district. And just, we've had this question before. If you are, so I've actually in the past couple of years we've had a lot more companies that have actually protested. So just a reminder to make sure you have your protest procedures in place. And if a company if any company wants to protest any bid so you award a bid and some other company that you didn't give the bid to, they can protest. And so you need to make sure you follow your protest procedures. We've had several cases of schools that someone has protested that bid. And also the transparency. And it is the case that if, again, say you have two people that want to be awarded a bid. The other one that does not win the bid, they can ask to see the documentation and why you approved how you approved. They are allowed to do that. So, and you can give them that information. That's not top secret. So again, when you're thinking about procurement, you really have to be, again, free and open and fair. So you have to really notate and dictate why you're choosing and doing what you're doing and why you're buying from who you're buying from. Okay. And then again, here is all your potential contractors that you can reach out to. Your broker, the grower, the manufacturer, or the distributor. These are all, and this little chart kind of gives you all the examples. Also in the state of Oklahoma, we have some co-ops. We have one with commodities, and we do have one for food. So that is something else that you can think about doing, is maybe, or even your area can do a co-op, a purchasing co-op. The benefits of using a co-op is so say you have 10 schools and these 10 schools get together and they decide on the products that they want to use. You just have a bigger buying power because all of you are going to use the same types of products from a certain vendor. So you would all get together, you guys would write a contract. A lot of them do taste testings and stuff like that. And then you all have to purchase off that same contract. And so it can lower the price. We also have state contract, which is kind of the same thing. The state contract though is developed by the state of Oklahoma. They put out a bid for food, and these people, if you do state contract right now, Cisco has won the bid. It's different than if you're using Cisco directly from the vendor, as in you don't have a salesperson, you have to do everything online. But what happens is the state of Oklahoma put out a bid to do food for any state-run entity or any school is allowed to use them. And the information, if you are interested in doing that, is you would contact Teresa Johnson, and that information is in our procurement manual. So you can contact her for that as well. Now, there was some controversy a couple years ago. The state did rebid recently, I believe it was last year, and they did add all the appropriate documentations that was required by USDA. So the state contract is approved in the state of Oklahoma, and it is able to use it because they did fulfill all the requirements USDA requested. And they have to do the same procurement. They had to add it that you have to do at your district. So that's why it didn't meet, because it didn't meet the standards that USDA set for you guys as well. So. Okay, what questions?
All right.
You can unmute too. I'll have Dana unmute her so she can, we're going to echo a little bit.
Okay, so we had a question. What if you're with a food service management company? If you're with a food service management company, we are going to look at how the school district procured their food service management company contract and how that contract is being monitored by the school district. So if you have a food service management company, it doesn't release you from all child nutrition duties. And you will, of course, need to follow the RFP. And schools need to know that once you've contracted with a food service management company, it doesn't just mean the food service management company comes in and takes over your food service. They are there to help you run your food service more efficiently if that's what you hired them to do. But the contract needs to be monitored to maintain the integrity of the program.
And we'll also talk more about the food service management company contract here a little bit later on as well.
Right, that's a little different part of the presentation. Then we had a question from Lynetta that I thought was really good. Did you say that that the company that wins the bid can have access to all the bid information from other companies? Not necessarily. What we're talking about in protest procedures would be if, say, you sent out to 3 companies and 3 companies sent you back in a bid, and maybe you awarded to company X, but company Y comes in and says, I think I really had the lower bid and I'm going to protest that you gave that bid to company X when I really think I had. You will have to follow your protest procedures and how you handle that protest. But companies can actually, because now they can actually do what is called open record request, and they can request the information that you looked at from the other companies or see what their other pricing was. But you have to follow they have to follow your district's open record request to obtain any of that information on the bid process. And I think that was our 2 main questions that we had. Someone said we couldn't see Kendra. Nope, I'm sorry, she doesn't have a camera on her laptop, so all you'll be able to see is the PowerPoint presentation.
And I'm not minding not having a camera right now with having to wear a mask all day.
All right. Okay, wait a minute. We have one more question. Let's see what this is. I'm brand new to child nutrition. Do I have to contact our vendors we used last year and give them a chance to bid before we can start ordering food? Don't apologize, first of all, Trina, for being brand new. All of us were brand new at one time or another. Yes, procurement should be done basically yearly unless you have some other type of contract with your vendor. But school nutrition they can do a renewal contract, but our contracts have to run from year to year. So if you're brand new, obviously you're getting a little late start, but you should get pricing from at least 2 companies. And we're going to go into some methods here in a minute. So Trina, don't panic yet. It's not time to panic yet. Now, Laura's asked, can a company that did not bid ask for records? Laura, I'm assuming anyone that completes an open records request can obtain those records. And then somebody said, can't see me either. I don't know how to fix it. So I'm not sure. Jody, are you not seeing the PowerPoint at all? If you're having trouble, you might log out and log back in. That would be the only fix I would know at this point. And like I said, we don't have Gary that's on the line with us because he is on a principal call right now. But try to log off and log back on, because we had that issue in the office a while ago with Leanne, who was in here, and she logged out and logged back in. Okay. Lori says, when you say we can renew our contract with a vendor, does that mean we do not have to go out for bid every year? Well, it would depend on how you did the bid. If you, let's say you, and I know we're getting kind of ahead of the slides here. You did a request for proposal, and you put in that request for proposal that this was going to be a contract that you were going to do, a 1-year contract with 4-year renewals. That could be a possibility even with a grocery company. You typically, most schools don't, they bid year to year with their food. Some of our bigger school districts do a 1-year contract with up to 4 years of renewals. It would work the same way as a food service management company contract works.
And for the procurement review, we would want to see if it's a renewal year. You'll show us the documentation that you gave them for the renewal year, and we'll have to see the original contract to show that this was a multi-year contract.
Right. Does that answer your question, Lori? What if we piggyback? If you're piggybacking off of a contract, you need to make sure that you are a part of the
Yeah, you have to be a part of. So example is, say there's a co-op and you want to piggyback on that. Every year for that original contract, there's a dollar threshold that's usually attached to those. So you have that whoever's doing the co-op has to make sure they're stay under that threshold, 1. And number 2, every year they usually do like an attachment or an addendum where it lists every school has to be listed that's on that piggyback. If your school's not listed, you're not allowed to be on that contract. So, but you can piggyback. If you are a food service management company, there is no, so you cannot piggyback on another school. Every school district that does a food service management company contract no one can piggyback. You have to have your own contract.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started on what is the procurement plan. Kendra, take her away.
Okay, so everybody must have a board-approved procurement plan. You do not have to have this approved every year. You only have to have it approved on the years that, like, anytime that you make changes. If you looked at the handouts, if you were able to open, I had one person not able to open the handout, but if you just click on the link that we sent, or if you go to other documents in CARS, when you click on that link, you hit open, and then it opens up a file, and then you can click on anything that you want in there. But we do have a procurement plan in there that a school can adopt. It does have all the requirements that USDA wants. So we do suggest you can even, it's in Word, so you can take bits and pieces out if you need to. You can add to it. We would really suggest that you add to it versus taking anything away, just to make sure that it doesn't miss anything. But what the procurement plan does, it's required for everybody. Every school district must have a procurement plan. It doesn't matter if you're a food service management company or not, you must have one. It talks about how you procure, because even when you're doing a food service management company contract, you are still procuring it. So in there is your plan of how you procure. And there's some things it must include. It must include methods of procurement. A lot of our districts, I would say 90% of our school districts, do not use formal procurement, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but I would always suggest it. Leave it in there. And the reason why is because, say you go with a food service management company, you are required then to do a formal, or there could be some instance that you may need formal. We just suggest you leave everything in there, because if not, you're going to have to add it eventually again and then get it board approved. You also must have a chart of procedures, a code of conduct, protest procedures, and Buy American. And I will say, in our procurement plan, the chart of procedures is attached to that, but the protest procedures are not. And you can also check with, every district has to have an attorney on retainer, but you may check, the protest procedures do not have to be child nutrition specific. Your district as a whole may have their different protest procedures, but you do need to have protest procedures. They just don't have to be child nutrition specific. Something else that we'll talk about, I'll go ahead and bring up right now when we talk about thresholds, is some schools want their thresholds to be different than what the federal government allows, meaning they want it a lot smaller. I've had a lot of schools the last couple of years have a child nutrition only procurement plan, and then maybe a district procurement plan for all other purchases. So that may be something when we go through the procurement plan, when we talk about thresholds, that you may want to consider, is if your district's thresholds are a lot smaller than the federal guidelines, you may consider having just a child nutrition procurement plan instead, and then the district can have their other one. Something else that must be in there is there must be a statement about minority firms, women's business enterprises, and labor surplus area firms statement. There needs to be something in there about geographical preference and beverage contracts. And then just a reminder, this has been around forever, that all contracts over $25,000 must have a non-kickback affidavit. It's not in with the procurement plan, but we do have a copy in our procurement section in the manual, and I believe I put one in the handouts. So now we're going to start talking about the methods of procurement. We have two types. We have informal and formal methods. Most districts are using informal, which is either micro purchasing, small purchase procedures, and then non-competitive. And then we have formal, and your formal is your invitation for bid, or IFB, AKA sealed bid is what it's mostly known as, and then request for proposal. And we're going to go through each of these methods. So something that I'm going to pull it up really quickly. Something that the whole thing I wanted to put into your handouts, I did not get it in there. Let me see if I can pull it up. No, let's see here. Go to. So in the handouts that I wanted to give you guys, I forgot to put this in there, but something that's very helpful. I know. I was trying to cover it. I was like, okay. So it's back in there. It's not in there right now, but I just re-uploaded it, so it's in there. But we do have this flow chart that it's very helpful. It's not up yet. Not quite yet. Let's see. Well, it looks like it's not going to work. So there is a flow chart. It's very helpful to help you with procuring. It just lets you know if you're doing the correct method that you should be doing. It's just not wanting to pull up. Oops. Okay, so first one we're going to talk about is micro purchasing, small purchase, and non-competitive. Now, oh goodness. So it gets a little bit confusing. Oops, hold on, I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay, so micro purchasing gets a little bit confusing to people. What all people look at when they think of procurement is the thresholds. Yes, there are thresholds, and once you go over that threshold, you are required to do the next available item. But when we do procurement reviews and we have you fill out the tool, you have to tell us how you procured it. So with micro purchasing, the aggregate transition cannot exceed 10,000. But you have to buy from multiple vendors. You do not have to get quotes, and the price must be reasonable. The main time a district is going to use micro purchasing, to be honest with you, is in an emergency situation. An example, you buy your food from Cisco, Benny Keith, one of those US foods, and you ran out of hot dog buns that day. Well, you need hot dog buns, so you got to run to the store and just buy some. When you're doing that, you normally buy from other vendors, but in this case, you're adding another vendor to the mix. Just because the purchase is under $10,000 does not mean it's a micro purchase. You have to be spreading, we call it spreading the wealth. So an example, one that we saw a lot doing procurement reviews, I wonder what, is people would put like pest control under micro purchasing, but they're only purchasing pest control from one company. If you're doing it from multiple companies, then that's micro purchasing. But when you're only doing from one company, that is not micro purchasing. You must buy items from multiple vendors. So again, a program operator may not always purchase from only one source, rather purchases must regularly be made using multiple available qualified sources. And the products or services may be similar or dissimilar purchased at once as a single collective unit. So an example too, what could be is like repairs. You may, like your fridge go out, so you find somebody to do your fridge, and then the water heater goes out. So on your repairs, it could be a micro purchasing type situation. But it's not based on just the price, it's how you actually procure it. And honestly, a lot of people that use this is our daycares. Our daycares buy their food from, say, like Crest and Walmart and Homeland and Braum. So it was mostly geared for very small entities like that that buy from multiple sources. And again, if this is an example, is this may be used when items normally purchased from the vendor that you award the bid to, however, items were not received, and so you go and you buy something from the store. But again, the price is still supposed to be reasonable. It can't be, I was going to say $20 ground beef, but it feels like it's almost at that price right now. It's crazy. Now, small purchase is the most common small purchase procedure. The threshold is now $250,000. So anything from a vendor, if you're spending under $250,000 with a vendor, I would definitely suggest small purchase procedures. A district can lower that. They can have their own. So say you have a school district and they want their small purchase to be 100,000, then when we do a review, we look at your procurement plan and whatever it says in there, that's what we have to go by. So yes, the federal government's is 250, but your district could be something different. I had a school district that theirs was 7,000. So whatever your school district has, that's what you must go by. So when you do small purchase, you do have to write specifications for most things. I'll say for like food, and I'll kind of get into that. And then it must be sent out to at least 2 qualified sources. So the thing with small purchase is you are checking prices. That's it. If you check, the item could be a $5 item, but if you check prices from Amazon and Walmart, you just did small purchase. So anytime you check prices, that is small purchase procedures. So again, for smaller purchases, you can obtain from at least 2 sources or 2 vendors. You can get quotes by either by email, you can do it by phone, or by a catalog. And of course, now the most popular way is by a website. So all you're doing now, specifications is what we kind of refer to as, and I don't go a lot into specifications today, but specifications, I tell people, is like writing your grocery list. You're telling the vendor what you want. You're telling them that you want 10-pound rolls of 80/20 ground beef. Everybody needs to be able to bid on the same things. So that's what the specifications are, is you write them, and you can use your printer, you can use the printout that they give you, the vendor printout, but you can't get something from a vendor. You're supposed to write the specifications and give it to the vendors for them to give you prices back on. So the only requirement for small purchase is you must send a bid out or check prices from at least 2 vendors. That's your requirement. Now, if a vendor chooses not to respond to you, they do not have to. You did your due diligence. You send it out to 2 people, and if one just responds, then that's okay. You fulfilled requirements. And just make sure you document, because we'll need this for the procurement review. But we need to know who you contacted and if they contacted you back, and pricing and stuff like that. We do have a vendor contact sheet that you can use. It is in the procurement section, and I do believe it is also in the handouts that were given on other documents. It's located on page P31, P for procurement 31, if you are interested in using this form. So the last type we're going to talk about in informal is non-competitive. So non-competitive is procurement through solicitation of a proposal from only one source, or after a solicitation of a number of sources, competition is determined to be inadequate. So a non-competitive proposal may be used when, say, you award the contract is not feasible under small purchase procedures, sealed bids, or competitive proposals, and at least one of the following circumstances apply. The item is only available from one source. Emergency circumstances will not permit a delay resulting in competitive solicitation, or competitive is determined to be inadequate after solicitation of a number of sources, or awarding agency authorized the non-competitive proposal, which would be our office. So some of these would be an example of non-competitive is emergency situation. That's another one. Say your hot water heater goes out and you can't really at the time just go and call everybody. You need it fixed immediately. You can go ahead and do non-competitive at that point. There's been some computer programs for instance, our office, the system that we've used for cars, we were only able to get that from one company to maintain it. Everything that we had in our specs, they were the only ones. So we ended up being able to do a non-competitive. We had to do it the same way that you guys have to with the state agency. We are not exempt. We as a state agency have to follow the exact same rules that you guys follow as well. We are not exempt from this. So what questions do we have about informal procurement?
Well, I'm not sure if everyone's asleep or if you guys just really understand informal procurement. The one thing I was going to say, okay, here's a question. Is there a dollar amount threshold for non-competitive proposals?
No, there's not, because it has to meet these qualifications where there's no
Yeah, there's no
other way that you can, there's no competition, or either it's an emergency situation, or if you can only get it from one person. So that's why there's no dollar amount.
That one I would be very careful with using the non-competitive proposals. But what I was going to say is the reason following procurement is so important, not just because it's a regulation, which is a very important reason, is you're wanting to get the best pricing you can get for your cafeterias and for your schools. So if you are not doing a good competitive price quotes on your cafeteria supplies and foods, you're not really being a good steward of your food service dollars. That's where you can actually save some money. Some of you, sometimes your superintendents come to you and ask you, how can we save money in the child nutrition? Going out for good competitive pricing could really help you save some money. Because if the vendors know you're watching your pricing, you're watching your contracts, then you can really save on some of your food costs. Okay, we've got a couple questions that are coming in here. I'm in a small town with only one grocery store. I need, for example, buns in a hurry. I only have one option. Then you need to, Becky, you need to check pricing in that store and get a price quote. And you might even go talk to them and say, okay, I'm going to be buying bread from you occasionally. Can I get a better price? What is your bottom line price? Check pricing. Check pricing with that grocery store and with maybe a bigger vendor. Small purchase method does not mean you have to buy from the lowest priced vendor. Small purchase allows you to have some flexibility. Your reason that you may buy from that small town grocer is, well, first of all, maybe the bigger company won't even bring you groceries. Second of all, maybe that small grocery store will deliver to you to the school, and Cisco, Benny Keith, US Foods, whoever, will only drop once a month. And the small grocery store guy says, I'll bring you what you need once a week. That could be a reason why you went with that particular vendor and not with just the lowest price vendor. Hope that helps a little bit there, Becky. And another question to verify, you are only required to request 2 quotes. Yes, used to be 3 bids and a buy, but USDA has changed that. You are required to send to at least 2 vendors.
And this is for everything, including milk. And just so people realize and understand, so say people use Highland Board, and I know Borden went out. I'm just thinking of any milk companies. I don't like to exclude any. And then say you use Cisco, US Foods, Benny Keith, one of those vendors, you can ask one of the vendors that you use for food for the milk bid as well. But again, you don't have to use them, but you do have to at least ask 2 people for bids. And one of my territories that I had when we were, because I grew up in a very small town, and people were like, there's only one person that would service us. Well, when they started procuring, they started reaching out to other people. And guess what? Another vendor started coming in, and it was a great deal. They got better pricing, and they delivered more than what they wanted, because the other person thought that they just had that area and they could just substitute if they wanted to. They could come once a week when they told them they'd come twice a week. So all this is another good reason to reach out. You never know who might start coming to service you by reaching out for that bid, especially if those in your area start doing the same thing, that you might be able to get a lot more competition.
Exactly. And even a lot of times your Cisco, your Benny Keith, they have milk also. They can sell you cartons of milk. So you can get a milk bid even from them, and the pricing may be equal or even better. So another question is, one of the hardest things for me is to write specification. It says most are fairly simple, but on the meats and such, the examples are a little intimidating. How hard are we graded on our written specifications? We don't necessarily grade you on your specifications, but what we want to see during a review process is your specifications need to be clear. They need to be specific. You want to make sure when you send them out that you're going to get price quotes from the different companies, that you're ensuring that you're getting the same product. In other words, if you just say, I want price on apples. Okay, how many thousands of different apples are there? There's canned apples, there's fresh apples, there's frozen apples. You want to be specific. Meats are the same way. Kendra brought up ground beef. You want ground beef, you want fresh frozen? Do you want 80-20, 70-30, 90, what is it, 90-10? Ground beef comes in all different ways. If you're happy with how you've been getting it in, look at that last invoice and that you ordered, write that specification exactly like that invoice reads. Another place for an example of writing specifications is the food buying guide. Look in there and detail it, your specification out just exactly like that's written in there. Our next question is, if we use a food service management company, do we still send out bids? Now, that's kind of a loaded question because if you're using a food service management company, most of the time they are providing your meals. So no, you're not sending out bids for groceries and supplies. But if you are going to purchase anything else using your food service dollars, say you're responsible for paper goods in the cafeterias, the food service management company says, we'll buy all the food, but you have to buy any paper goods, paper towels, paper plates, paper, cups, those sort of things. Then you would be responsible as the school district to get price quotes and either do the formal or informal, depending on what your procurement plan says. But no, you don't typically have to bid out your groceries if the food service management company, that's what you're paying them the service fee for, is those groceries. Our next question, back to the question about going to the small store in the town, wouldn't that be micro purchasing if we have it? It would be if you could spread the wealth, because remember, micro purchasing says you have to spread the wealth. You can't just go to the same store every day and buy the same type products. In other words, if you go to the grocery store, if you go down to, Cardinal Foods and you buy bread, milk, and cheese, and tomorrow you need bread, milk, and cheese again, and you go back to that same store, that's not a micro purchase. That would not be considered a micro purchase. So our next question, 2 for milk and 2 for food and 2 are together. Trina, that's going to all depend on how you write your specification and your request for bids. If you want to lump everything together and call that one bid, or if you want to do it separately and you want to send your milk specification out to 2 vendors and you want to send a food list of specification out to 2 vendors and get back possibly 4 bids, that would be fine. That is completely up to you. We get some of our things from Sam's Club like spices. Is that okay as long as we get a bid for them? Yes. Yeah. So if you say you check pricing at Sam's and you check pricing at
your vendor,
your other vendor, Cisco,
Amazon,
right? You check pricing. You've gotten to pricing. You've met your requirement for the small purchase procedure.
And schools more now, but just by the way, are buying stuff off of Amazon. So it isn't like, oh, I have to do pricing, or I look at prices. You might be surprised where you can find some things at a cheaper price. So that's just the whole point of this, is you figure out there may be other ways and cheaper ways to do some things.
Okay, so would our bid from distributors be an RFP and not an IFP, since we only have them bid a section of food used frequently rather than an itemized? Okay,
I'll talk about formal. Most people are not, even if you're doing formal or informal, you still have to do specifications. So you don't get by with not doing that. Just to do a formal procurement, you have a lot more requirements. So we really do suggest you cannot split it to be under the 250 or whatever your threshold is to keep it at that, but we'll go over what formal procurement is.
Yeah, Lori, we're going to let Kendra go ahead and start discussing our informal and formal. That way, maybe she will answer your question and clear that up for you.
Okay, we're going to go back to formal procurement. And so formal procurement is required on any purchase over 250,000 or whatever your procurement plan says. So if your procurement says that your threshold's 100,000, we have to go by your procurement plan. But the federal is 250,000. And again, you also have to do specifications. And again, they must be you send them to at least 2 vendors, but you also are required to do an advertisement in the newspaper. So that is a required for formal procurement. Now, we've had this question before, and when we talk about like verification, or when we talk about the press release, how you send it to the paper and they're going to charge you, so then you don't have to have it printed. No, if they're going to charge you for the advertisement, you have to pay for it. This is required to do formal procurement. You can also have the advertisement like on your newspaper, or I mean on your school website and stuff, but it is required that it needs to be in a newspaper. Yeah, it does have to be advertised like in the media where you do put all of your information. And we're going to go over like some of the things that will need to be in this advertisement and how long that has to be in there. But again, this is part of formal. The biggest things that we see is the advertisement is the biggest step that they don't do. But that's the requirement for formal. So again, you are required to send out to at least 2 people. And then, but again, just like small purchase, they are not required to send it back to you. You just have to do your due diligence. Now, for like in the newspaper, and the one thing about when you do it formally, which even when you're doing it small purchase, you have to say like, okay, give me my bids back by July 9th. But there is actually a formal bid opening when it comes to formal procurement. So you will have to specify a day and time that has to be back to you. And if it misses that deadline, then they cannot participate in that bid. So you really need to like timestamp or date step when things come in. But all that stuff has to be in your advertisement. But this is a lot more strict when you do formal. It's a lot more, it's a very formal procedure. So you have to do things very by the book. And then we're going to talk about the types of formal, but these are required for no matter what type of formal procurement that you do. You must advertise and again have a date and time that it has to be into you, and you have a formal bid opening at that time. So with formal procurement, USDA suggests at least 45 days for an IFB or for the invitation for bid, and 60 days for an RFP, your request for proposal, from the time the information is given to vendors until the time the bid is open. So that's what they suggest, but our office, you must have no less than 30 days. You have to give companies time to look at it and process it and give you information back. So we have the suggested days that it's required, but we will not allow anything less than 30 days. That's too quick for a company to have to look through all the documentation that you sent them and then have to give you back a bid, because that won't create fair and open competition. So we're going to talk about the difference between invitation for bid, which is a sealed bid, which was very well known as a sealed bid, and then we're going to talk about an RFP. So when we talk about the sealed bids, when you open that bid up at the bid opening, you must go with whoever has the lowest price. There's no exceptions. Now, we talked about small purchase, how you don't have to go with the lowest price, but we do say that you need to justify. So for instance, the small town grocery store, bread is $3.50, I'm making numbers up, or $3.50, but there's a Walmart that's 50 miles away, that's $2.50. Well, you're gonna use your small town grocery store because it's in the same town, you don't have to drive, all that kind of stuff. So you're telling us why you're selecting the one that may not be lowest. But when they give you a sealed bid, when you open that up, you have to go with lowest price, because when they submitted a bid to you, they said that they could follow all the information that you gave them, that they said that they would, and they said they gave you a price back and that they will do everything in the terms of the contract. So it's very cut and dry with the sealed bid, and it does have to be sealed, and that's when you do the sealed opening. What we see a lot when we do procurement reviews, and I know Dana's going to start shaking her head in a minute, is milk. So it is not required for milk to be a sealed bid. It used to be many, many years ago. It is not required. What a lot of people do is usually it's just the same person keeps giving them a mailed envelope that happens to be sealed, and they think we did a sealed formal bid, we opened it up and they're the price. No, you have to follow proper procurement. They may give it to you in a sealed envelope, but you can still do small purchase procedures. But you have to follow these steps formally for it to be an actual sealed bid. So that's why we say, please do small purchase. And we're going to even get through more stuff that you have to do when you do an RFP or an invitation for bid. So request for proposal is a little bit different. It is required, the method of procurement for food service management company contracts. You don't get to do a sealed bid. The reason being is with an RFP there's other factors besides price. Price does have to be the primary, but you can select based on other items. So a lot of service contracts, especially service, when service is a big deal to you, you would do a request for proposal. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the evaluation, but again, a request for proposal is not kind of like small purchase. It's not based alone on price, but price does have to be the primary consideration. Here's an example. Whenever you do an RFP, you do have to have the evaluation criteria listed and given to the people that you're sending a bid out to. We have added this into our procurement plan. We didn't have one in there before. It's always been in the RFP for the food service management company. We just never had it. This is an example of one. Again, price, it's highlighted in red because it is the most important, but as you can take this, you can use the one in the procurement plan, and you can change some of the other things, what's important to you. These were just some that I threw in there, but the points have to equal 100. And usually there is a team. So usually say you have 5 people that are looking at the contract, each person will do a criteria worksheet, and then whoever has the highest points, that is the company that will win the bid. So when we talk about like protest procedures, we've had several people, several food service management companies that have wanted to see this criteria sheet, and you have to give it to them. And a reminder, so we did have this happen on the criteria sheet. Now, when we talk about points, so we had here points. Whenever you are sending your RFP out, you will state how many points each thing is worth. So let's say that price is worth 25 points and the rest of these items are all worth 10 points. You specify that in ahead of time so people know what the criteria is, how many points you're giving for each criteria. We had one food service management company contract that when they looked at the criteria, which we saw it too, there was, I think, 3 companies. All the companies bid something different price-wise. So one was a higher price, one was a lower price, one was a medium price. When they did the weighted sheet like this, so say the maximum points were 25 points, they gave all of them 25 points. You can't do that. You have to give, say, 25 points to the one that did the lowest. You have to do 20 points to the one that did the medium. Then you do, say, 15 points for the one that did the highest. You can't just give everybody the same amount of points, especially when it comes to price. Someone gave you a higher price. You have to give them more points whenever you're awarding the bid. So that is the big difference. We have, again, this criteria, it's on page P11, but it's in the training manual, and then I think we have another little area where it's located at that you can use this as an example, or you can use it for yourself if you would like. So not just doing all that is required for doing formal procurement, but it's also required to have certain clauses or get certain forms when you do formal procurement. And these are some of them. So Buy American is required with, like, it's even in the procurement plan, but it is required for all food and milk contracts. You do have to have USDA equal opportunity information on, and again, we tell you the information. This comes from, this could change. This is from the USDA, our procurement review. This is what we were required to get from you if you do formal procurement. So we were shocked too when we saw all this information, but requires a lot of work on your end as well, of things that you need to have in there to meet federal requirements. And then here is extension on that. We have, again, the non-kickback, the Davis-Bacon information, and the Bird anti-lobbying form. So you have to, not only when you do your formal, that you had did all the front end stuff, but you have to make sure you have the correct clauses. And then at some people you may have to get a form for. And kind of as I mentioned earlier, an SFA cannot arbitrarily divide purchases to fall below simplified acquisition threshold just to avoid doing formal procurement. I mean, yes, we have some schools that they get their fruit and vegetables from one vendor, they get their meat from one vendor. You can do that. We're going to talk about how you award it, but you can't purposely like try to divide things up just so you don't have to do formal procurement. Now that we scared everybody, what questions do we have about formal procurement?
All right. Well, I think we're still kind of on small purchases just a little bit, but Lori asked, are small purchases based on price or can other factors prevail? Other factors can prevail. So that's what we were saying. If Kendra's example was if your small grocery store, the bread was $3.50 a loaf and the Walmart 50 miles away was $2.50, you could justify shopping at the local store because it's local. You don't have to drive. You don't have as far to drive, as much gas, the time and everything it takes to go to the Walmart 50 miles away. So other factors, but you need to document why you went with the higher priced vendor. And then Bob asked, if the vendor says they cannot meet one condition but are the low bid, do we still get the bid? Do they still get the bid, or can we go with the vendor that meets specifications? You're going to want to go with the vendor that can meet all of your requirements that you put in your invitation for bid or your request for proposal. Because if they can't meet one of the factors, that makes them non-responsive. Yeah. So you would go with the vendor that would be the meet all the responses that you put in your requirement. And Marla, will welcome. We're sorry you didn't have electricity. We're glad you have electricity again. And Gary's told you that we're recording and we can send you the link. So we'll get you taken care of, or you can join us again on the 5th for the first half. Somebody says retirement is looking better and better.
It's not that bad, I promise you. If your school can do small purchase, we say do small purchase. We really do try to, if you are spending under the threshold, there's really no reason for you to do formal. I'm just being honest. Small to me is the way to go.
Me too. I agree with that 100%. And then there's the other possibilities of looking at the different co-ops.
Mm-hmm. State contract.
State contract. So there's other ways, especially if you're a, even medium-sized school district and time becomes a factor.
Yes. And state contract too, just so if I didn't tell you, say you use state contract and they require that you use them 80% of the time, which is prime vendor, which we'll talk about. But state contract, the thing with state contract is they procured it for you. So that means you don't have to do any specifications or anything like that. Now, if you are using another vendor, so say you use state contract 80% of the time, but you use another vendor for 20% of the time, whatever you're using that other contract for, you do have to write specifications for them. And you do have to, and you can even like look at the state contract and be like, this is where I got my pricing. But I'm just letting you know that if you do state contract, which we've had a lot of schools in a lot of very rural areas that no one would deliver to them, use state contract because state contract is required. I believe they're required to go to any place in the state of Oklahoma. And they also just if you do state contract, I always told some of my old schools, you may not always want to go lowest price with them. Like say you have a selection of green beans, they service prisons, they service hospitals, anything state ran, they're required to use. But just because it may be grade C versus grade A, but just a little warning on that one, because they do have to service anything that's state owned in Oklahoma, or state ran, I should say.
Okay, for Minnie who's totally new and totally lost, I guess you're not totally new, but you are totally new. If I use small purchases, do I still have to include micro purchasing in my procurement plan? We would recommend strongly that you, at a minimum in your plan, have the different methods of the micro and the small purchasing. Just because micro is an emergency type of purchase, so if you really need to run to the store and buy a loaf of bread because you got to school Monday morning and all your bread was molded, you're not going to have time to call the vendor to add more bread. You're going to run down and buy some bread and bring it back to school and get it served. So have micro purchasing, because that's that emergency type purchasing. But I would, at a minimum, have micro and small purchase in my plan.
Like I said, we do have a procurement plan that you can adopt. You literally put your name on it and put some people's names of who is responsible for whatever purchasing you do. And it covers all the methods. It has everything in there that USD requires. And that way you won't have to, hopefully anytime soon, update it.
Right. And Jaylene, you say you're fairly new and still learning. So your procurement plan says you will use the state contract. Is there, and then your question is there a list of vendors we can use? We do not put out a list of food vendors necessarily for the schools. I can run through my head and name off about 5. We have Benny Keith, Cisco, US Foods, Tankersley.
We have Mid-America, Gadarian, and some of these are kind of a centralized where they service.
Right. Gadarian is in the Ada area. PFG is more on the eastern side. PFG and Tankersley are more on the eastern part of Oklahoma.
Is it Mid-America that I'm thinking? It's north of by Enid, and now they've gone to the Panhandle and down to the western side.
Right. So micro purchasing is for emergency purchase, last minute. Basically, yes. It doesn't mean it has to only be used in emergency, but its basic reason is for emergency type purchases. Where is the plan I can adopt? It is in our child nutrition manual in the procurement section. You can go in there and it's can be pulled out as a Word document, but that's under just the procurement section in CARS. Look in the procurement section in CARS under the 2021 school year. There's a complete procurement section that has some different documents that you can adopt pretty easily. And Lori asked, and small is under the threshold, not sent out for bids, but check competitive pricing. Yes, your small purchase method is where you're going to check pricing, be it catalog, email, a price list that you've received back from your vendor. However, you've checked those pricing. You just want to keep documentation of how you've done that, but you want to be the one writing the specifications. Sometimes we see a vendor spreadsheet that they've walked in and given you with the pricing, and you may have one from some of those vendors we just named, and then another one from another vendor. You want to be the one driving the process. You want to be the one letting them know what items you want pricing on, not them telling you what they're going to give you pricing on. Okay, how do we get signed up for CARS? Well, how you get signed up for CARS is you need to have your superintendent set you up with a certificate of authority that you will be issued then a username and password. But to get to just what we're talking about, other documents, you can send one of us a request and we'll just send you the link. You do not have to have a username and password to get to all of our documents and training and other materials. It is listed for anyone. It's kind of a public domain on that part. The actual application and agreement system, you do have to have a username and password. Okay, and then Carla says, I'm a small rural school by Drumright, Cushing, and Manford, and Mid-America delivers in this area. Okay, well, we were thinking it was on. for the
They've
west
been moving.
part.
They've been around, I don't know, for a long time, but they're moving more to the state, which is great.
And here's the thing, you guys don't have to wait for a particular vendor to contact you. You can call all of these vendors. You can find these vendors' emails and send them information. Get acquainted with them, get to know some of their salespeople, and they could really help you on some of your pricing information.
And talk to local schools even around you. Because I think that's what's happened a lot too, is they're like, oh, you found somebody else. I may try to use them too. So you can contact some other people, some other schools close to you as well to see who they send out bids to.
All right, I think that's all of our questions for right at the moment.
Lots of great questions. We're gonna talk about the solicitation right now. So these are some things that are not allowed. So a potential contractor cannot write the bid for proposal or any of your product specifications. We kind of mentioned that. You can, like for your product specifications, you can, again, use the invoice, like what Dana said. Any invoice that you see, like the product that you like, see how it was written on the invoice and you just write it down. Just how it is on the invoice is a great way. Any potential contractor evaluating the bid, or submitting it, they cannot, that's not allowable as well. And again, any purchases without following procurement procedures is unallowable. I was reviewing a school right before procurement reviews were happening, and they did not follow proper procurement, and USDA actually said that I could take back every meal because it was all their food. I could take back all the funds that they gave to a company that was not procured correctly, and it would have been over $1 million. I did not do that, but this is how serious USDA takes it, is that you have to procure. And if you're spending money, child nutrition money, it needs to be procured, because we technically can ask for those funds back to child nutrition because it wasn't procured. Wow, I didn't realize we had all this fancy stuff in here. So we're talking about a solicitation letter. And this is just a letter that you can have on file, a one-page letter. But when we were talking earlier about like the terms and conditions, this is what some good information to, oops, I'm sorry, let me go back, to have in it. So it should be sent to all vendors that you want to receive price quotes from. And it should include, it should be on school letterhead, have the date it's sent out, attach a copy of your specifications that were written by the district, the method the school district would like the vendor to respond. Do you want them to respond by email, fax? Do you want it to be sealed? How do you want them to, and when the date, include the date when the vendor must respond. And again, if it's formal, we need a time and date, and what's also in your advertisement. What the district will or will not accept. So this is some good information to put in this letter. It's really good to have something in there like what you will or will not accept as to substitutions or shortages the vendor might have. For instance, you request in your specification that you receive chicken nuggets with a CN label. You could put on in your solicitation letter, you want CN labeled on all products. State within your solicitation letter that for any item that requires a CN label, that you will only accept a CN labeled product as a substitution. Or then if they do when they make a substitution and it's not made with the CN label, you should have specified that in your letter, and that could be a cause for termination. Like you could tell them, we can have like 3 issues, and once those issues are documented, I have the right to terminate. So these are just some really important things. You can put anything you want in your solicitation letter. You can put in there how many days a week you want them to deliver. You can say the time that you want them to deliver. And things can be negotiated. We're not saying you can't negotiate. When you do a sealed bid, there's no negotiating. RFPs can allow for some negotiating, but these are some things that you should really put in your letter. This is like your contract, the solicitation agreement, and I would even have them sign it, to be honest with you. Have them sign the bottom of the letter saying that they agree to all this information that they're providing to you. And I mean, I've even had some schools put in there that you have to call me before you make substitutions. Like, don't just throw a substitution in there. You have to call me before you make any substitutions. So that is your agreement, especially if you're doing small purchase. That's your kind of a contract that you have with that vendor. And it's good because it keeps them accountable as well. This is what they said that they would do. And if they sign it, then they're saying, we're going to do this, if they're going to give you back a bid. Some other information in there is the equal opportunity employment statement. You should have Buy American, that is for all food. We talked about the termination for cause and any special conditions. So other items that could be included, it can state when the district, when terminate, that you can terminate the agreement, such as if the district contacts the vendor for the same complaint a minimum of 3 times regarding things such as quality or price changes, for instance, overcharging that was quoted, substituting without contacting the institution, or substitution C and label items for non-C and label items, changing the agreement without consent from the district. Those are all kind of examples that that you can put in there. The district can terminate the agreement, but the terms and conditions must be clear for everybody that is bidding to understand. And for the person, that's not fair to them that you're like, I'm terminating this contract if it's not specified that you didn't say that in the contract to them. It doesn't have to be big and lengthy. Just put some things that are very important to you in that solicitation letter. A school district can also give a vendor special conditions, such as the district will receive a copy of all nutrition facts labels on items received by the district. Be as specific as you want in your letter. This will just provide you with the items and service that you require. This letter is an agreement to terms as specified. You might want to consider having, again, a signature line at the bottom. So, and then we do have an example, and we have one in our book, but this is just kind of an example-ish of a solicitation letter. If it was me, I would have a lot more information in here, like how often I want them to deliver it. And that saves you also from having to tell everybody, because everybody you give it to, they should be bidding on the same things in general. So that tells them we want it delivered twice a week. We want it after lunch. So. So solicitation for procurement, when soliciting quotes, bids from potential contractors, it is both necessary for formal and informal procurement because they assure that all potential contractors are receiving, again, the same information. When we think about informal procurement, we often picture the purchaser picking up the phone and obtaining price quotes from several different potential contracts. Telephone calls may be part of the process, but other actions are needed too to make assured, free, and open competition is being used. The process is documented to show compliance with all applicable requirements and provide documentation in the event a contractor or potential contractor believes they were not given the same information or opportunity as the others and files a protest. With any procurement, the first thing with this school should do in procuring goods and services for a specified procurement period, use the small purchase procedure, is determined the specific items for each good or services needed and the specific quantity or frequency needed during the procurement period and the quality needed. So we have, again, it's just important, I believe, to have all this stuff written down. And so everybody is bidding on the same thing and they're not coming back to you and saying, I never heard this information. The information submitted to the vendors must be put in writing. It ensures that all potential contractors again receive the same information. Once the SFA has written the specifications, an adequate number of potential contractors should be contacted for price quotes. And again, that should be sent to 2 or 3 people. And this gives you a history of who you sent it to, and that the way they can use it in the future of who they're going to send it to. But it's just really important to write all the information down. It's just, again, I've been here for a while, for 12 years, and the last 3 years we're getting more people protesting. So the more documentation that you have, the better of why you did what you did. And if you are doing something more formal, like an RFP or anything like that, you do need to have evaluation criteria. You can draw something up, a contract that's way more formal than just a 1-page solicitation letter, because you just need to have that, like, again, with all of them, you're specifying to them what you're wanting, because with an RFP, if it's like a lot of services and stuff, like what are you wanting in your service? Is it a computer program? What is it that you're wanting? And again, you have to have that evaluation criteria and the points, the number of points that you're giving to that needs to be given out to all contractors, anybody bidding. So do we have any questions regarding the solicitation?
Just a second, I'm sure we'll have a few. David made a comment though that in our manual on page P8, we kind of left something hanging. So David, we will take a look at that and see what we intended to actually say on those small purchase, what needed to be considered. I'm not sure where we were going with that, but we will look at that and get that added to that. Pat Gower in the chat box added the CNP website address so that you can get to other documents. And if you'll look in the gold bar on the left, down about halfway, a little more, it says other documents. That's where you can go and click and see the wealth of information. So we have a question. You are required to solicit 2 or more qualified vendors for each product or service with a smiley face. Mm-hmm. Yes, Mona, 2 or more, but a minimum of 2. You can always send it to more.
Yes.
More folks. You don't have to just say, well, I'm just going to send it to 2 because that's all they said. Remember, it can go to every vendor in the state of Oklahoma. It could go to every grocery store in the state of Oklahoma. You might not want to do that. That would be a lot of time on your part to look through all those bids if you received all of them back. I think that's about all the questions right now we have. I had a comment I was going to make. Let me see if I can remember. Oh, okay. I know what it was. The example letter Kendra showed you guys that is in our training manual. If you're going to use the sample letter, make sure you change it and put it on your own letterhead. We have seen solicitation letters that went out that were for Modine Public Schools at 1234 Modine Avenue in Modine, Oklahoma. That's just a little tidbit of information. Just if you're going to use any of our templates, make sure you fashion them to be your own. I'm glad you guys can't see my face. I'm glad I kept my camera turned off today. I'm making faces today. So Kendra, I don't see any more questions. So I guess we'll go ahead and go on with awarding the bid.
Perfect. Okay, let's award this bid. Okay, so if the potential contractor provides its price or rate quotation verbally, the school must protect itself by confirming the information in writing. If questioned, a verbal quote does not provide proof of competitive procurement. You can ask them to give it to you in writing, or we do have forms. We like our forms here in Child Nutrition, but we have some like on P70, P71, P72. We have several different types of forms that you can use, and you can write it down too, but I would definitely, if you can, put it in writing just so you are aware, because you may get one price from one vendor on one day and one from another on another day, and that way you have it documented of who you talked to and when and the price that they gave you, because even if they try to come back later and saying, I didn't give you that price, you have it written down, and you know, that kind of information to where, because they do need to, if they should not be changing prices on you. We understand like some things might get changed, fruits and veggies that could, but I have had a school district that actually went out to bid almost monthly on their fruits and veggies, because whatever price they are giving you, they should really be honoring that price throughout the duration. But I do understand that fruits and veggies are hard to do that, but you may have something again in your solicitation letter about that, because, you know, there could be a freeze on oranges, and then so prices of oranges go up. But so we understand with agriculture how it works. But to simplify the process, the SFA can request potential vendors to submit written quotes. And again, you can put that in your solicitation letter. Like, instead of calling me, I would rather you just send me everything in writing. It just needs to be, whatever you choose, please make it communicate it to all potential contractors. Emailing is a great source as well. That's probably one of the best, I think, is emailing, just because you have it in writing and you have their information. It's just, the more documentation you have, the better. And because we ask to see that, and you can just forward it on to us whenever we're doing a review. But we're going to talk about the 3 main ways people do award the bid, and we'll talk about, so we're going to talk about prime vendor. We're going to talk about market basket, product grouping solicitation, and line item. So I'm going to briefly just go through this. And the reason why is because we have this information in our training manual. It's also a handout, but we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of all of these, of all the ways that you can award the bid. So, and just a reminder, we've said it before, but with informal procurement, it is not required the school or institution go with the lowest bid, but there would need to be an explanation of why the district chose to go, why you chose not to go with the cheapest. It could be reasons such as quality of food, service, etc. If issues do arise with a past vendor, make sure to document each instance of what happened and if it was resolved or not. The district can reject a bid if history has shown the vendor, contractor, or services provided were not responsive or responsible. So again, document. If you keep on getting, I had a school, they kept on getting spoiled milk. They wrote each instance down, they called them, they did all this stuff. The next year they tried giving them a bid and they refused to even look at the bid because they were so unresponsive. So you can do that. Just document. So the first one we're going to talk about is prime vendor. This is one of the most common, especially in Oklahoma. This is where the school or institution selects the vendor they will use because of the whole, and looking at all the items to be procured is overall the cheapest. And you, again, prime vendor is when you spend about 80%. So a lot of our schools literally use one vendor and then they maybe get a milk bid. This is the most common, is a prime vendor. And again, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it because we have this form in our procurement document. We talk about the advantages and disadvantages for each of them. But again, prime vendor, you really only deal with one supplier, and orders are placed, delivered, and invoiced with one supplier. Yeah, a lot of people's favorite on that one. But I do see a lot of this one too, which is market basket. So the bidder with the lowest price receives the award based on total prices when all items are combined. So an example of this is if you do your fruit and milk, or your fruit and vegetables separate, or you do like your milk products separately. Some people do it, they give their meat all to one vendor, or your canned goods. It's by grouping. It's not by item, it's by grouping. So like I said, a lot of times some of our bigger districts, they will have a fruit and vegetable vendor, the milk vendor, again, maybe a meat vendor, and then they do everything else. But that is market basket. And again, we have the advantages and disadvantages. Again, we have that handout available for you. It's in the handouts that we gave, and then it's also in our procurement book. So I'll let you guys look at that. And the last one, and this one, it's a doozy, but you can get some cheaper prices, but this is very hard to do, is doing it by line item. This is when the bid is awarded by each product separately to the lowest bidder. So an example could be your hamburger meat you purchase from one vendor. You get apples from another vendor. You may get cheese from a vendor. So it really is almost line item. I don't know if I really know of any schools that are doing it particularly by line item. Did you do by line item?
Okay, I'm gonna stop because here's a kind of comical story. When we first went self-op in McAllister, I did a line item bid. I didn't realize I sent it out as a line item bid until I had received all the bids back in from 5 vendors. Yes, we awarded 5 different vendors with 10 different sites, and they were delivering once a week. So that was 5 vendors times 10 times 4 times a month. First of all, my cafeteria managers, and all of you that are cafeteria managers are smiling, almost killed me because they were having to figure out what item they had to purchase from what vendor. Then my accounts payable person almost was about to kill me because that was, 10 times 4 was 40 invoices a week. So pay attention how you write your solicitation. But on the serious note, line item, when a vendor gives you a price in August in this solicitation letter, you want to tell them how long you want this price good for. Because one of the things we find in doing procurement reviews is your vendor comes in August with a very low price. They give you a price on ground beef at $3 a pound. Well, when we are checking pricing on a procurement review, the price has gone up to $10 a pound. Well, you go back, we write you up for this in the review because you're not getting the awarded price. And your vendor says, oh, well, that price was only good for August. So and then you've been buying from them all year because you as the school district's responsibility to monitor your contract is to go back and check pricing, make sure what the bid price was is the bid price you're getting. We find that a lot in the procurement reviews. And I know the DWG, Robin, who's worked on the procurement reviews this year, has found that still yet. So we want you guys to be aware that when you've been given a bid on an item and a price, that price needs to be set for a certain amount of time. Now, if the vendor bids it for August and that's all it's good for, then maybe you need to be doing bids every month to be able to get pricing from that vendor if they're not willing to lock pricing in. But you can ask up front in your bid solicitation, I want pricing locked for a semester, a month, a semester, or even the whole school year. That's why sometimes it's better to do like the prime vendor and do them for a year. And someone's going to probably pop up in the chat and say, well, we don't get as good a pricing. True, because that prime vendor, if they're going to lock pricing for the year, they're not going to be able to give you, necessarily the lowest price they're going to get that item at all year. They're going to have to plan for the fluctuation of that item to be able for them to make a profit and to get it to you at a reasonable price. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you're going to do your solicitation. If it's going to be in a prime vendor, if you're going to use that market basket example where you're going to do a group of different items, or if you're going to award something line item.
And I was actually going to piggyback off what Dana said too. I did have a school that did their solicitation by month, and it sounds like it's a lot, but really she's like, it's not very much work because her specifications were written. They were written, and all she did was change the dates in her solicitation letter. And so she would send it out every month, and they would just keep sending it back to her, or even every 2 months. So it's really not as much work on her end because her specifications were written, and specifications, we've talked about it. We're not expecting them all to be done by any means like that. When we would do a review and your specifications need worked on, we're like, just maybe every day work on just a page, and a page could be 10 items. Just keep it in rotation of the items that you're using. But it really, it sounds like a lot, but it really, if you have all that stuff, all you're doing is just resending the same thing out and changing the dates on your letter, like say every month or every 2 months. So it doesn't have to be as overwhelming. It sounds so overwhelming. I know it does, but there are ways you can make it not as overwhelming. Small purchase, if you can, in my opinion, and just documenting, just document. And again, here are the advantages and the disadvantages. Of course, you can get great pricing, but man, that's a lot to do by line item. I think that is definitely the most rare here in Oklahoma for sure. And even we have a lot of even smaller schools, honestly, they will use 2 vendors. They use 2 vendors, like 50-50. So you can do items like that. And again, here's another form that we have that you can put your price quotes on. We have multiple forms in there. So we have one for market basket. We have one for line item. We have all different kinds of fun forms that you can use to help you with your procurement process. Do we have any questions regarding solicitation? Awarding the bid.
No, it's actually on solicitation. I'm glad you said that.
I knew it.
She can't see the chat. When you bring it up on our computer and you share your screen, the chat disappears for some reason. Anyway, not you guys' problem. That's kind of our issue. Marissa, you asked, do you have to state in your solicitation how you will award for small purchases? No, not necessarily, because small purchase should just be in your procurement plan. So we're going to ask for documentation as to why you went with a vendor if they were not the lowest price. But there's nothing in there that you need to let the vendor know why you're going with them or any other vendors. Okay, and Candace says, I learned the hard way. Yes. Way to save my procurement plan. My bid and all my stuff is on a flash drive or something because my computer crashed and I lost all of it. Very good lesson learned. Yes, we probably all learned that lesson at least once, Candace, that everything should be backed up. Either have a backup at your school, some type of flash drive, maybe you have a district shared drive or something that you back up stuff on. I learned that lesson the hard way too one time, lost everything other than what I could find on flash drives and other things that I had stuck on. Okay, Callie asked, so if we want to use vendor A and vendor B, small purchase, how would we award that? Well, it depends. If you're wanting to just, because you want to use vendor A and vendor B, you need to have some type of reason why you're wanting to use two different vendors. Example might be if you...
So some that I've seen that used too is one that there's products that they like from one vendor that they can't get from another vendor that may be one. And sometimes it's just a pricing on one, like we talk about groupings. The biggest thing I see when they use two vendors more dominantly, like using them not 50-50, but maybe 60-40 is because of like the CN labeled products and some of the actual products that the kids will eat. They can get these products from one vendor and then they just buy everything else from the other vendor.
But here's the reason you shouldn't just use two vendors.
Right.
Because you like vendor A's salesman and you like vendor B's salesman, and you want to make sure you spread the money, spread your orders around, because that's not really necessarily helpful to your school district. That's not getting the best deal for your school district. Because if you're just ordering whatever, you're looking at your menu and vendor A comes in on Monday and you're looking at your menu and you're ordering from vendor A what you need for Tuesday, Wednesday, and vendor B comes in on Thursday and you're ordering from him what you need for Thursday, Friday, and Monday, that's not true procurement. That's just you're ordering what you need from whatever vendor. There should be a method to this when you're spreading that wealth around like that. And then the one thing I was going to say is on our prime vendor, we have 80% that you need to buy from the vendor. That is a percentage that USDA recommends. That is not set in stone. So you may put in your RFP, your invitation for bid, that you're going to purchase 70% from a prime vendor, or you may say 90% from a prime vendor. It allows you, or you may say 100% from the prime vendor. The reason they allow you to do the percentage is that gives you a reasonable to go purchase something from another vendor. Like in Kendra's example, if vendor A, you awarded them the prime vendor, but there's a certain chicken nugget or a certain, several types of meat that only vendor B has, and you want to be able to purchase those from them, and you've done a taste testing and that's what the kids want, then you're going to purchase them as a small purchase because that's what the kids prefer, and you can show us in your taste test that's why you're buying from that vendor. But that 80% is the USDA recommended percentage, but not set in stone. So Carla asked, I'm a small school and still use two vendors, roughly 75-25. One vendor I have access to more products, but the other one is so much more reasonable on canned goods, bread and produce, and some supplies than my larger vendor. So the same thing here, Carla, you may want to send it out, your small purchase, and you may be able to document why you're buying the 75% from one and 25% from the other. Or you may be, if you've checked those prices, I think you're good there. I think
I like to see when someone's using more than one vendor, if you can. I understand there's some rural places that really they can only get one vendor because of the amount that they have to purchase to use them. But to me, it's showing that you are a lot of times looking at prices because of, like you just said, you get better pricing in this one, but you need the food variety from another. So I do like to see when you're using multiple vendors.
So Lynn asked, does this procurement plan need to be done when school starts? Lynn, yes, your procurement plan needs to be done before you really purchase anything. Look around your school. There is probably a procurement plan there because this is our 4th year doing procurement reviews. So your school district should have had a procurement review at a minimum at least once in the last 4 years. And we would have written that up and had you turn in corrective action if you did not have a procurement plan. Any other questions? All right, we're going to go ahead and move on through.
I'm going to lump the next two together because it's not a whole lot to talk about, and then we can answer any questions. So we're talking about managing the contract. So once the district awards the contract, the final phase of the procurement process, contract management begins. This phase is the key to the overall success of the procurement process, and we promise you that is truth. You can't just award the bid and expect, honestly, that your salesman or that they're doing everything that you said in your solicitation. The biggest part is managing that contract. Federal regulations require the school maintain a contract management system to document whether contractors have met the terms, conditions, and specifications of the contract. It focuses on ensuring that federal dollars are used to purchase and receive what the SFA needs to operate the school nutrition program. And lastly, the contract management documents are useful in resolving protest and or provide evidence of non-responsible contractors. I'm going to throw something else in here. I talked about what formal procurement was. Most districts do not need to use formal procurement. So I didn't want to go into a whole lot of detail about it, but there are ways, and I'm just giving an example of managing the contract. There are ways you can award a formal contract. You can do a fixed price fee. You can do a cost plus, but that's what the things in the contract that you're managing is that you are getting, and even any other contract that they're charged, like Dana said earlier, are they giving you the pricing for the pricing at the time that they told you would? So if they said they can promise you pricing for a semester, are they doing that? I had one school that they said the salesman, they would not honor the price. So what they started doing is every time they weren't honoring the price, they put the product back on the truck and make the guy take it back. So, or he would substitute without calling them, or it wouldn't have a CN label. They would tell them to put it back on the truck and take it back. They wouldn't accept it. They would not accept the food that they were giving them. So after a couple times of doing that, he quit. He finally started following the contract, I should say. So you just have to sometimes be careful. The contract management phase is a part of the process that assures the district gets what it paid for. The focus is on ensuring the goods and services outlined in the solicitation and resulting contract are provided. In other words, the district monitors the goods and services it receives to make sure it receives the quantity and quality of good and services it requested, receives the goods and services on time, and it charged the correct amount. Documenting this information supports payment to the contractor. So again, it's very important to manage that contract because they could tell you one price and then the next month, your first delivery, all the prices are way off. Just please watch whatever you want or even the pricing that they give you. Make sure that they are following those guidelines that you set forth for them. Effective contract management starts with developing clear, conscious terms and conditions in the contract that are understood by both the school and the contractor. This information should be outlined again in the solicitation letter. To facilitate communication upon award of the contract, it is recommended that the district hold a meeting or phone conference with the contractor to discuss the contract's terms and conditions. And this can take 2 minutes, but you should talk to them before you talk about these conditions. This not only achieves clear and mutual understanding of requirements and responsibilities of each entity, but also open communication channels so that the misunderstandings are resolved immediately. The contract management plan should address the person responsible for monitoring the contract. In part, this includes warehouse and/or kitchen staff who receives delivery. Last but not least, employees should be trained on how to implement the plan, including the terms of the contract, like when the deliveries are made, the conditions of the delivery truck, what needs to be documented, like the food temps, the amount received, and how to document. For instance, signing any receipts or any invoices. That should all be something that you guys discuss when you're managing your contract. Now I'm going to jump into records. And again, we're talking a little bit about the procurement review. So with the procurement review, we look at a couple of things. So one is now super confusing, so it's super fun for all of us, is if you use a food service management company, we are reviewing you every 3 years, a minimum. If you are not using a food service management company, you're reviewed every 5 years. We're hoping this changes, but this will be the first year for that. So there is a chance that the year that you get reviewed for an AR, you will not receive a procurement review. They could fall in 2 different years. If you are, say, using a food service management company, your AR is all every 5 years. For everybody, it doesn't matter. But procurement is different. And we always look at the previous year's records. So when we go into FY21, we will be looking at FY20 procurement. But we will want to see current information if you are using a food service management company, because we will need to see your invoices and pricing and stuff like that, and your renewal. And then here is some of the things that we will look at, that we will ask to see. And I believe I did put in the handouts just an example of a checklist that we have used in the past of items that we will request for the procurement review. So we gave you the small little checklist that's available to you. And just a reminder that encumbrances and purchase orders and invoices and receipts, you have to encumbrance before and get purchase orders before you can buy. And invoices and receipts, those have to be signed and dated. We always look at that. That's been going on forever, is invoices always have to be signed and dated. And then the non-kickback. And then to retain. All documents relating to procurement, we need that for a minimum of 3 years from date of final payment or until all audit or protest findings are resolved. And the reason we're making sure you guys are aware that we will look at things from the previous school year is because I know a lot of people box that up and then they have to go and find the boxes. So anything that your procurement, make sure you keep it out that you did for FY20. And then here again is our resources. I did not put the child nutrition website on here, like the actual web address, but these are some good places for procurement. And again, Dana, I, and Mona have we have had some expertise in the field, unsolicited expertise in the field. So you guys can always contact us 3 for questions as well. We're more than happy to help. We did the reviews for 2 or 3 years solely, just do procurement. I think we did it 1 year with the review, and then for 2 years, it got too much for all the consultants. So we, even doing us for reviews and procurement. So we learned quickly. And that is our procurement workshop.
Okay, JD asked, can I see the last 2 slides again? Which 2 slides are you referring to?
Probably, is he wanting the encumbrances and purchase orders, or is he wanting the procurement review?
Let's see if,
There's that one, or there's this one. I don't know if you want. Oops.
but again, the PowerPoint is posted in CARS and other documents, so that if you need that, you can go pull that up and save that or look at that. The review documents is the one they were wanting. There you go. And remember, this list is not all inclusive of everything. When they are doing the procurement review, the first thing they ask you for is to complete the tool. Then they also ask for your procurement plan and your protest procedures.
And expenditures.
Well, the expenditures usually she asks for after you've turned your tool back in, your code of conduct. That's the information they need to get started on the tool.
And so it's a multi-phase, because I got some people that were very irritated this year. It's a multi-phase. So even when Dana and Mona and I did it, we sent it out to every school that was getting reviewed all at one time and sent a checklist of what we needed. And what you do is you fill out a one-page tool. It is one page, I promise you. You get your expenditure, anybody that you spent money with, you just put it where it needs to go on the tool. Was it a food service management company? Was it a small purchase vendor? How did you procure for that vendor? And then you send that back to us. And then we have to do a percentage of what you submitted based under the category that you submitted it to. So then we have to turn around and say, we selected this vendor, and this vendor, and then we need invoices. So it's multifaceted. It's not just an all-in-one thing. We may ask you for something, and this happens every year in December, and the next time you hear from us could be April, because we're doing it all at the exact same time. So
correct.
It's a multi-process, so it just graduates on itself.
And remember, this year with COVID, in the middle of the school year was even a more traumatic experience.
It was, and it was also the first year, it was the perfect storm for procurement reviews. It was the first year that we used a company, then we had COVID, so it was just kind of the perfect storm for everything.
Correct.
Because even for us in the office doing it the first time, it was a little bit overwhelming for us as well, because it's just it's a lot of work.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so we're not going to hold anyone up. We will do the certificates after we get the attendees list. The question and answers will come out after the August the 5th. We will combine all the question and answers and do a written question and answer documentation. But I will try to get your certificates out so that you can have those and get those put in your professional standard files and have that off of your plate. If you need us for anything else, do not hesitate to call. Applications are starting to be worked on. So if you are in the process and have submitted your application to CNP, just know a office person has been assigned to your county and will be getting with you. But please make sure you follow the process through, that you green lock all of your checklists, and that you do that final submit to CNP. It's kind of like the claim. It's a two-step process. Kendra, you have any final parting words?
I do not. Thank you all for joining us. I hope it was informative. I hoped it helped. We've been really wanting to do this, honestly, for a very long time. Make it bigger than then take it out of ABVM. It's just with COVID happening, it actually worked out. So I hope it was very informative. I hope you learned something. I hope it's not near as overwhelming as it sounds.
All right. Thank y'all. Gary, you can stop recording and we are finished.